everybody, and welcome to another video where I'd look back at some of the artwork that I produced for last year's 2023 Inktober session in preparation for this year's Inktober, which I'm planning to take part in. So in this video, join me for day 2 of Inktober 2023, where the prompt words were Spider from the official 2023 Inktober prompt list and Cosmos from the Fairy Little Peach 2023 prompt list. Now, from what I can remember, I did have quite a strong idea for what I wanted to do for this illustration as I went into this video, but I decided to start off as I usually do by studying some spiders to get an idea of the shape and the anatomy. I remember trying to take particular care in studying their legs and look at where they join to their bodies, as I think for most people the legs are probably one of the most recognisable features of a spider, so I was particularly keen to try and get this part right. Not gonna lie, I don't often study creepy crawlies and such like. I tend to gravitate a bit more to like cute fluffy little animals, so I remember actually being quite excited about the idea of studying something new and a little bit out of my comfort zone, which is part of the reason why I do quite like taking part in these types of art challenges, and I'm hoping that this year will again push me a little bit out of my comfort zone and maybe get me drawing things that I wouldn't usually draw. But yeah, anyway, back to what I'm doing in this video. I basically carry on using my art materials to fill my sketchbook spread with different studies of different spiders, looking at various species and spiders in different positions. You may notice that I switched from using a basic sketching pencil to using a biro pen for the second sketch. This is mainly because I wanted to speed up the sketching process a little bit, and for some reason I always seem to sketch a bit quicker with pen than pencil. I don't really know why. I think it might be something to do with the looseness of the marks that you can make with pens, but yeah, for some reason it just really helps me to speed up if I switch to using a pen. I do remember saying that for Inktober 2023 I wanted to experiment with a few more art materials that I don't use as much, so I decided for the third spider to use charcoal, thinking it was a good option to use it as it would allow me to look at shading and highlights, but for some reason, and I don't know why, I decided to use a really big, stupidly chunky charcoal stick rather than going for a smaller one, despite the fact that I actually keep them in the same art box, so I don't really have any excuse for doing that, other than I think that I might have been thinking that maybe I could use like a bigger charcoal stick. It would fill up the area in the sketchbook a lot quicker, and I just wanted, being a bit impatient and wanted to get the studies done. But yeah, using the bigger charcoal stick stopped me from having a bit of control over the marks I was making. So you may notice that eventually I do switch to a smaller charcoal pencil when I realised that I didn't really have that much control. But yeah, I think I managed to rescue the study using the smaller charcoal pencils, but yeah, I probably should have just used smaller ones to begin with. At this point, in typical me fashion, I wanted some colour in my sketchbook spread, so I then switched to a red felt tip pen and basically done a little silhouette study in the corner of my sketchbook page. And then I basically continued switching between my biro pen and my red pen and done a few more little studies of the spiders, mainly focusing on the different positions of the legs, and gradually filled up my sketchbook spread with some quick little studies until I felt I had enough references to use when coming up with the illustration in the future. Moving on, I decided to then start focusing on the second prompt word, which was cosmos, and so I started off by sketching out some cosmos flowers, and this is where I also started developing the idea for my final piece. As I said at the start of this video, I remember going into this Inktober video with quite a strong idea of what I wanted to do, and that is that I wanted to do an illustration to do with spider webs hanging between the leaves and the stems of a flower on a frosty winter morning. So after doing a few studies of spider webs on the stems of the cosmos flowers, I moved on to coming up with a thumbnail design for a final piece. So using a pencil, I began developing the composition for the final illustration. Now I do remember that one of my aims for Inktober 2023, and again for this year as well, was that I wanted to use the prompt words to help develop artwork that had a bit of a story behind it. So I remember that when I was building this composition up, I started to notice that the way that I had placed the flowers made them look like a bouquet, and this sort of gave me the idea that maybe the spider was collecting flowers from the garden and using its spider web to make them into a bouquet of flowers that he could then give to someone as a gift. So I really kind of liked this idea, and once I had thought of the idea, I kind of settled on it and carried on developing the composition further, grabbing a pen to fill out any gaps with a variety of twigs and flowers to go alongside the cosmos plants. So whilst I was producing a composition idea, I managed to think of a silly little poem to go alongside the illustration, which I quickly jotted down on a spare piece of paper, and then because the poem was about a sad little spider called Seb saying sorry for scaring someone, I decided I wanted to quickly doodle some traditionally cartoon style spiders at the bottom of the page, just to kind of reflect what the story idea was. I also at this point decided to grab a spare scrap piece of paper and do some studies of the character that Seb the spider was saying sorry to, and decided to use the bare studies that I'd done in my Inktober session the day beforehand as inspiration for this second character. You'll see later on in this video that I come back to working on this more cartoony illustration idea, but I decided at this point to go back to my first illustration and start painting it as a final piece. So So after spending a little bit of time tracing the composition idea onto a nice bit of paper, I then went back to my desk and slightly improved the design by drawing a spider a bit further down the paper. Luckily I'd chosen a slightly longer piece of paper to do the design on, so I had a bit more room to kind of spread out the design and stop it looking so crammed in. So once I completely finished sketching out and finalising the design, I then moved on to painting the final piece. I ended up using a mixture of different materials to paint this final piece, starting with watercolour and acrylic paints. I also then ended up using like water soluble pencils and a variety of different pens, and basically just kept working into the piece using different techniques until I achieved the desired marks and textures that I wanted. I think overall the painting came out okay. I'm still to this day not 100% sure about the metallic silver paint that I used in it. I did manage to tone it down a little bit, but I probably should have perhaps used a slightly smaller brush and less of the silver paint to make it more subtle. But yeah, overall I quite like this little final piece, and I really like all like the little spots and stuff. I think it makes it look like it's set on a very misty day, which is sort of what I wanted to begin with. At this point, for some reason, I obviously wanted to give myself more work, and I obviously wasn't content at having just one illustration for this Inktober prompt word, so I decided to paint a more cartoony illustration that went with the little poem I'd written. So having sketched out the little characters, I began painting them. From what I can remember, I decided to use a mixture of acrylic inks and watercolour paints to paint these designs. I think during this period of time, I was a little bit obsessed with giving my little animal characters yellow welly boots and scarves, which is an obsession that I'm still, to this day, not 100% over yet. But yeah, I think I actually liked this illustration more than the first one I did in this video because it turned out really cute and it helped tell the silly little poem that I'd written to go with it. So yeah, as I'm quickly finishing off this painting in this video, I thought I'd just quickly read you the poem that goes with these little illustrations. So here it is. Seb was feeling ever so sad. He didn't know what had made them so mad. He spun on his web trying to think of an idea that would stop them from shouting and shaking with fear. I need to make them a gift so they'll see that they really don't need to be scared of me. I'll go in the garden in a wee small hours and make them a lovely bouquet full of flowers. And there we have it. That was the little poem that went with my two little illustrations that I came up with for last year's Inktober Day 2 prompt words. So I am planning on participating in this year's Inktober, so hopefully there will be some more content on this channel coming up related to that. And I do also have one more video from last year's Inktober which I'll be posting on here as well. But yeah, that is it for this little video. Thank you for watching. Please feel free to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you again soon with another arty crafty video. Take care. Bye!